Hello, and welcome back to Mythical History. I should be lit now. Growing up as a boy, I always remember my dad smoking a pipe. I'm smoking here a Peterson 2019 Christmas pipe. I love the copper little connection there. It's got a nice, I think this is, I'm not sure if that's the acrylic or not. I think it's acrylic stem. Beautiful pipe when I saw it. But as growing up as a child, I remember my dad always smoked a pipe. And as I was using this, I remember that I got this from an individual on um, Facebook. I'll have to look up what the name of it is, but it's got a nice little end on here to dig out the bowl. Nice little tamper tool. My dad always smoked a Dr. Gray bowl, but I never remember him ever using a tamper. Always used Captain Black, usually the Captain Black Gold. Maybe sometime he would get white. But a tamper wasn't something that he used. I found that to be extremely useful in keeping a pipe lit. If you pack a pipe well with good tobacco and light it good, get the smoke out of your face. I'm not sure why it rests right here. But to keep your pipe going, if you'll just simply tamp it every so often, not to be too often, keeps the leaves together. You don't have to push down hard. I can usually keep a pipe lit for 30 minutes or more, depending on how big the bowl is, and works quite well. I'm smoking in this some Cornell and Deal Black Cherry. Got it from Pipes and Cigars. Got a little sample pack here. I've been doing a little bit of mixing of some tobaccos, and maybe in my next video I'll show you my Hobbit's weed. I've seen several presenters have created it, but it uses some vanilla. I typically mostly smoke aromatics simply because of the room note, and but I've been trying to mix some cherry, vanilla together, branch out a little bit, challenge my taste. I've been reading a book by F.W. Boreham, and I'd imagine that most people have never heard of F.W. Boreham. He was a speaker and writer in the late 19th and early 20th century. I think he was born around 1950 or 1858 and died in 1959 or so. But he wrote several volumes, and I just kind of discovered him a few years ago. I enjoy reading these short little essays. He has a way of taking a typical topic, just an everyday topic, and bringing some type of a lesson out of it. Could be a moral, ethical, spiritual lesson, practical lesson, something of that nature. In the volume here, or at least in one of the articles, are the essays entitled "A Slice of Infinity." He's talking about his books, and as you can probably see, I have somewhat of a sickness in that area. When I was a kid, actually until I was about 20 years old, I absolutely hated reading. Even in high school and in early college, my area of study was mathematics and physics and the science type area. Well, those are areas you don't really have to write a lot of papers. I mean, you're solving problems, or you're trying to solve some kind of a physical problem with mathematics, and you don't really have to write 10-page papers necessarily. So when I was in high school and when I was in college, I would go to the literature class because you had to have it, and I just hated going there. I thought there's no need in this. There's no reason for this. I understand why people read. Someone would ask me, how did you manage to pass those particular courses without reading the stories? And I would do it by just listening in class. They would talk about the stories, and I would take notes. And I discovered that that was pretty much all I had to do to actually pass the course. And they would talk about the stories and the test. But when I got married in my early 20s, my wife was a reader, and she bought me my first book. I did like fantasy literature. I read some of that because I was a big D&D aficionado, Dungeons and Dragons, back when it was coming on. And so I read some of the Conan books, um, Dragon Magazine, and things of that nature. But it was just few and far between. I more enjoyed playing the game than actually reading some of the books. But she got me my first nonfiction books, and from that, my world just seemed to open up. As you can see, it's represented in the sickness that surrounds me here. But Boreham's essay on A Slice of Infinity, he talks about, as he sat in his library, he said the books around him, he said there were really three different types. He said there were books that everyone should have, reference books and things of that nature. Pretty much every library, at least at his time, he said they had these books, so I went out and I bought the books as well, because they were just books that you're supposed to have in a library. He said then there were books that I felt I needed to have and I wanted to have. These are books that kind of filled most of his library. He surrounded himself with the topics and the subjects that he wanted to read about the most, that interested him. He said, but then there were the books that were, he found out later, became the most important to him. These were the books that he said that found him. He didn't find them. And he gives an illustration. He said he went to an auction, and he said there was a collection of books, a lot of books that were all bound together, and he bid on them and he won them. He said when he got them home, he said, I noticed there were books in there that were on topics that I had never read about. He said, so I kind of put them aside. He said, but I decided that I was going to read every book that I had purchased. He started with the books that he liked, and then he worked his way to the books that he really wasn't that interested in. And he said, he writes this in the essay. He said, it has become my experience from the auction room, from buying that collection of books, that really saved him. He said, when I had read all these books, which I should never have bought if I could have helped it, he said, I discovered the folly of buying books that interested me. If a book appeals to me at first sight, it is probably because I know a great deal about the subject that it deals with. But as against that, see how many subjects there are of which I know nothing at all. And just look at all these books that I have no attraction to. All this tells me, why do they not appeal to me? He says, only one answer is possible. They do not appeal to me because I am so grossly, woefully, culpably ignorant of the subjects whereof they treat. Seems to be a little harsh on himself there, but it is true. I mean, we read books that we like. And he said, if I hadn't bought certain books, if they hadn't been in that lot of books that I purchased at an auction hall, I would never have had my mind open to those particular topics. He said, I was just ignorant of them, and I didn't know that I really needed to know them. He said, but once I read, I found out that these were quite important. Over the last 30 years, I guess I've tried to do that. I had not read this essay, but I tried to read more than just in one or two subjects. And he mentions that books are kind of like a slice of infinity. I've heard that said before. Maybe they got that from Boreham. But you read a book, and there's truth that's in there. And this is not just nonfiction books, but even fiction books. Stories teach us lessons. They teach us ethical truths. So I would agree with Boreham. I know I found it out in my own life, at least maybe the last 25 or 30 years, that reading books can really open your mind to the vastness of the world, the vastness of how much knowledge is really out there. And I am discovering more and more, as I said, literature and how important that can be. Not just fantasy literature or sci-fi, but just literature in general, poetry. Um, that is something I thought I would never read, but as I have started to read it, I've been drawn more and more to see I was pretty stupid back then. Of course, I was 20, so I give myself a little bit of a break there. But what books do you read? Love to hear some different types of books that you like, or maybe you're not a reader at all. You're more like what I was at one time, and you just didn't see the need in it. But I would encourage you, take up a book and read. It may surprise you. I was surprised at how much I really enjoyed listening to the thoughts of other people. I'm not going to say that every book is equal. I've read a lot of books, and there's some of them that are just out there. But even from the people that are kind of out there, at least you can learn what you don't want to know. What helps you interact, it's kind of part of a conversation. I mean, going back from ancient history to today, as you read different writers, you're engaging with their thoughts. You're contributing, really in a sense, to your own well-being or knowledge of the world around you. And I think that's important to grow and to be able to discuss. That's an area I think that we've lost today, at least within culture in the United States, is the ability to discuss with other people different ideas without getting angry. I find too many people, their idea of discussion is to yell. It's almost as though the person who talks the loudest must be the person who's right. I haven't found that to be the case. I think it'd be great if we could all just kind of sit down and talk about our differences. And because we live in the nation that we live in, we have the ability to say, hey, we can disagree and still respect one another. But I'm afraid we're losing that ability quite quick. Anyways, hope you have a great day. I hope you're blessed and whatever you're endeavoring to do. And remember the books. Those are important. Take care.